Greetings from Miami, Florida, the Versailles restaurant in Little Havana, as we continue along with Newsmax TV's coverage of Battleground, Florida. J.D. Hayworth welcoming you as our live telecast continues here. And what a Tuesday is on tap nationwide, but especially here in the Sunshine State. Small wonder that it's been dubbed Super Duper Tuesday. Not only Florida at stake, also Ohio, my native North Carolina, Missouri and Illinois, and even the Northern Marianas Islands, if you're keeping score at home. So lots to talk about, and let's welcome to the table three guests. To my immediate right, screen left, Newsmax Chief Executive Officer Christopher Ruddy. Beside Chris, we continue to enjoy conversation with the first mayor of Doral, J.C. Bermudez, and to my left, but screen right, community activist, longtime political activist, Raul Mas. Gentlemen, we appreciate your time. Chris Ruddy, brevity is the soul of wit. These two words, Battleground, Florida, encapsulate what's going on.
We're here today, Newsmax, JG, because Florida is so pivotal, not only for this primary. Whoever wins it will have a very strong hold on the nomination, and it looks like that's going to be Trump. But really, it's probably the most pivotal state in terms of the union and the general election. We know that in the year 2000, George Bush won the state by a few hundred votes. We know that Obama won it narrowly against Romney, and everybody thought Romney would win this state. So this state is critical. Some people say it's like a microcosm of the United States, because you have the South Florida group, many of them emigres from New York and New Jersey, a lot of Jews, a lot of Latin immigrants, and then you have the middle of the state, a lot of Midwesterners, and then the Panhandle, you have a tremendous amount of people from the South, that Southern tradition. So it's a state that Donald Trump should do very well in, but also the Republicans need to win in November.
You mentioned that Panhandle. The joke I heard is L.A., not Los Angeles, but lower Alabama in terms of what happens there. Raul Mas, here we are in South Florida, sure, where you cut your political teeth. We have seen, we were touching on it earlier, the fact that two Cuban Americans are candidates for the Republican nomination for president in a year that has had its share of surprises.
I share JC's pride at the fact that, the Cuban American population as a percentage of the entire U.S. population is relatively small. And yet we have two U.S. senators, and they're both vying for the presidency of the United States. I think that speaks very highly, and again, we're sort of, speaking of the choir here, but of our immigrant group that has been so successful and very different, I think, from the rest of Hispanic America.
Raul, what surprised me early on in this primary, and maybe Mayor, you have some insight into this as well, the Cuban American community in some of the early polling was not backing Marco. They were not backing Ted Cruz. Right. They were actually supporting Jeb Bush, right, and the Cuban American congressional delegation, I think 100% behind, right, Jeb Bush. What was the dynamic of that? Because that, and has Marco or Ted gotten that support, or are they supporting Trump now?
Well, listen, I think, to a certain extent, Jeb Bush is sort of the godfather of Republican politics and bringing Cuban Americans into the Republican tent in South Florida. There's a lot of loyalty going back to the governor from his time as governor of the state of Florida. And he's a native son. He grew up here. His Spanish is, as good as Marco Rubio's and certainly better than Ted Cruz's. So, Jeb Bush is really one of our own. And I think there was an enormous amount of loyalty to him. At the same time, he mentored, Marco Rubio. There was a lot of affinity towards Marco Rubio. A lot of Cuban Americans here were sort of split between the two.
So where do you think that Cuban American vote, will it go solidly behind Marco, or will it go to Trump, or will it be very divided, or Ted?
At the debate on Thursday night, I think, there was a lot of enthusiasm in the room for Marco Rubio. This is his base. I think there still is a lot of enthusiasm, but I think there's also the realization that he's got a tough hill to climb. And at the end of the day, you have sort of the split, I think, in the Cuban Americans here in Miami between the older generation that are sort of conservative and are going to vote, I think, for whoever the Republican candidate is, quite frankly. And then younger folks, the younger generation that may not be totally convinced that, Trump is somebody they want to vote for.
JC, let me turn to you as we were discussing political science majors here. So I need your scholarly advice along with the practical politics of it. The Jeb Bush situation now, why haven't we seen the governor endorse his one-time protege, Marco Rubio?
We have to be frank. I was there the day the famous sword was given. I was on the House floor when Marco became the Speaker of the House, and the famous sword was given. And realistically, we have to be frank as Republicans that relationship is probably not the same. It stopped being the same the minute that Marco Rubio decided to run for president, knowing that his mentor was going to run. And as Raul said, his mentor is very well respected in the Cuban American community, not just because he is a native son, but also he has had in the past many of the positions that we shared as a community. I think the reality now is that relationship is fractured. The fact that there has not been an endorsement, we're sitting here, 3 days before the election, and the gentleman who gave him the sword, the governor who passed on the future of the Republican Party in Florida, has not endorsed Marco Rubio. We have to be pragmatic about it. I think this is going to probably be an issue that if Marco Rubio does not become the nominee, does not become the part of an administration, and decides to run for governor, which is probable in 2018, and you will see an Adam Putnam or someone else run in the state of Florida, it's going to be very interesting to see what Governor Bush does, because there is no doubt that he has the fundraising capability and he does carry weight in the state.
Chris Ruddy, let me turn to you, because it's interesting. Some of the talk has already started about Senator Rubio retiring and the presidential campaign not continuing for him. There's speculation about Senator Rubio running for governor. Now, we just hear JC mention the name of my old congressional friend, Adam Putnam, the Commissioner of Agriculture here. The political future for Marco, should he have withdrawn, or is he wise to fight this on out through Tuesday?
JD, really good question. I think that if Marco loses on Tuesday, he is very hurt in his political career. I would never say he's never going to come back or he's finished. He's a young guy. He's a bright guy. He's got a lot of charisma, good conservative, understands state politics, all those things. The problem he's going to have, I think one thing that people miss is his run for president, which I think everybody agree was premature for his age and his ability and talents. Was a disaster for him. He only was in the Senate one term. So we elect here in the state of Florida a Republican. It's hard to get somebody elected. And rather than serve a few terms and getting some return on that investment, he's running for president. So opens the seat in Florida, and the likelihood in the polling data is showing that a Democrat will probably take his seat. We may lose the whole Senate because of Marco. This is one of the key toss-up states. We're very close because we're going to lose, the Republicans, that is, are going to lose several seats across the country. And I just think it was a big mistake for the Republican Party. I think it was personally a mistake for Marco. And I think he's not going to be the front runner in the governor's race if he loses on Tuesday.
So this adds insult to injury, Raul, if in fact the scenario that Chris points out comes to pass. And we should point out, for purposes of full disclosure, that anytime one party has a majority of seats up, as Republicans do this time, by definition they're vulnerable given the dynamics of the United States Senate. But can Marco Rubio, if he finishes short on Tuesday, can he resuscitate political ambitions here for governor or some other office?
Listen, I think he can, but I think, as Chris alluded to, this was absolutely a bridge too far, and there's going to be political consequences to that. I think the best thing Marco can do is sort of lay low for a while, go into the private sector. He's got young kids, make some money, okay? Get his family finances in order. Do some good work out there. Get involved in doing some interesting activities, perhaps on the philanthropic side or whatever, and regain his luster. And maybe 4 years down the road or 8 years down the road, look again to maybe go for office. But I think he's going to come out of this wounded, quite
A
frankly.
lot of people thought that his attack on Trump was backfired and was not good. I'm one of those folks that actually felt that was not why Marco fell and went behind, but that Marco needed to do that a lot earlier, and a number of other candidates needed to take on Trump. I mean, he was the front runner. Everybody seemed so intimidated. I was sort of impressed that Marco had the guts to stand up to him. Then he sort of was apologetic. You notice Trump never apologizes for what he does. Why can't you have somebody that does that once in a while against Trump? I think it's good for the political discourse.
Right.
JC, the toughest thing in the political discourse is coulda, woulda, shoulda. Now, let me just ask you this. The polls are saying one thing, but is it conceivable that Senator Rubio could surprise all the pundits and defy the polls and pull off a victory Tuesday? About a minute remains.
Oh, absolutely. I think Marco Rubio is a tremendous politician. He's shown that. His ascendancy has shown that he has a talent, the ability, a likability factor to do it. So absolutely he could pull off a surprise on Tuesday. But I agree with Chris in the following, that all of the candidates should have been more, let's call it, clear and combative with Trump from the beginning. They didn't do it because they were hoping somebody else would do it, and then that person would fall out and they would be the last one standing. And that's where they made a mistake. If you go back, if you want a Monday morning quarterback, but it's not over in Florida yet. Until the polls close, I think Marco Rubio has a shot.
Very quickly, Chris.
I
20
think
seconds.
the bizarrest thing I've seen in this whole campaign is Ben Carson's endorsement of Donald Trump.
That's something we'll have to talk
Yeah.
about more, because it is worth comment. Chris Ruddy, JC, Raul, thank you. And we will continue live from the Versailles restaurant in Little Havana as Battleground, Florida rolls on here on Newsmax TV.